Welcome to Habitly Courses, a production of Manage to Win. Each course is divided into multiple lessons for easy viewing. All are now completely free, so you can watch them on your own or work through them as a team. Please subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and share your favorite lessons with others. Try to find something that helps you be your best. Welcome. It's our 9th lesson of this course on solving, not selling. We get done with this one, we are 3/4 of the way home. The lesson is titled Selling Behaviors. It builds upon the prior one about problems and presentation. This time, we'll apply the DISC language to explain the 4 most common selling behavioral styles, which are how we convince others to agree with us and or take action. Some service technicians claim to hate selling, but that's not really true. It's the way that people sell us that offends us, not sales itself. Sales is not the issue because everybody sells. The core of selling is convincing or persuading someone to agree with something you want them to do or believe. We all do this, and many of us do it daily. For instance, you're selling when you try to convince friends to spend money to attend an event you want to see or participate in. You want them to agree with something you've read, watched, or experienced, or maybe you want them to adopt part of your personal beliefs on how to live life. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, everybody sells. We've developed 4 selling behavioral styles based on the DISC behavioral language. Now, as the previous lesson explained, we all demonstrate a mix of these 4 behaviors. However, 1 or 2 of the behavioral styles are typically our most intense, and this is where we recommend you focus. Each of these styles describes a high-scoring DISC behavior, such as high D, high I, etc. I'm going to get to them in a moment. I want to go through 4 questions to ask yourself first. And the reason I want to go through these 4 questions, I want you to be asking yourself these questions as we go through the lesson, and I'm going to ask you them again at the end, because you really want to figure out, how do I apply this information to me? Because once you understand how it applies to you, you can then apply it in how you assess how other people are behaving as they interact with you. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is, which behavior best describes you when you're trying to convince someone to take action or agree with you? The second is, which selling behavior is most comfortable for you when someone is selling you, the roles reversed? Number 3, what's your biggest weakness when you consider your most intense selling behavioral style, and what habit could you develop to overcome it? And lastly, 4th, what's your greatest strength when you consider your most intense selling behavioral style, and how can it become stronger? Remember, we always want to play to our strengths. As you go through this table, I'd like you to memorize your most intense behavioral style. So you got to choose it and memorize it. Now, you may have already figured out your most intense behavioral style from the prior lesson, so you're going to build upon that. So let me walk you through. We're going to start in the upper right-hand corner with the D. D is dominant, task-oriented extrovert. Remember, the top row are the task-oriented behaviors, the C and the D, and the right-hand column are the extroverts. This is the typical situation. The strengths of the D, when it comes to identifying problems and presenting them, basically selling, okay, the selling piece, is they're very results-oriented. They have a high sense of urgency. They can manage several clients at once. They're very responsive, and they're not afraid of any problem. Doesn't matter how big. I'll go in and solve it. Now, the weaknesses you also need to be aware of if you're a high D, and that is you can make statements rather than ask questions. You may try to overpower the person. You have to force yourself to follow process. You may miss some details or be unprepared, and you struggle to follow up consistently. Now let's drop down into the I or influencer. So We're going to stay on the extroverted side, but we're going to change to people-oriented. The people on the bottom row are people-oriented. So the steadiness and the influencers. So the strengths here for the influencer are they get along well with people. I can put a high I, a super high I, an extrovert, in a room with 300 people for 4 hours. They'll come out energized. They'll be everybody's new best friend, but they won't remember anybody's name. Now, they get along and they're enthusiastic. They start relationships easily. Of course, that's why I throw them in the room with 300 people. They're idea-oriented and they can rebound quickly from a no. So that's what happens with an extrovert typically. The weaknesses are that because they're talking a lot, they can overpromise or talk too much. They may have difficulty focusing on what's truly most important. They may miss some details or be unprepared, and they can struggle to follow up properly on time with all the details, whatever it might be. If you're a high S, you're people-oriented. You might be somewhat introverted, but you've got some strengths. You're steady and dependable. You're strong on follow-through. You are sincere in your desire to help other people. You're loyal, and you love to follow proven processes. You're all about process. You don't want risk. The weaknesses are you can lack time urgency. If you're a super high S, you may have never met a deadline you liked. You can be easily discouraged. You may have low confidence. You may give away too much because you don't want to get involved in confrontation. You possibly could use some more enthusiasm because you're a little bit withdrawn. You're introverted. And you can be slow to trust people and build relationships. Sometimes this saves you from getting hurt. Sometimes it stops you from advancing or getting some things done. And lastly, up in the upper left there, we've got the compliant. We're back in the task-oriented row, but we've shifted over with the S into the introverted. Strengths, these people know data. They are naturally analytical and well organized. The reason they provide good service is they have very high standards. They want to do it once and do it right. Those are all great. The weaknesses are that they can overuse the data, they can over-evaluate. Once again, they can be a little bit reserved. They can hesitate to offer ideas that are below their standards, or maybe they feel they need to research more. They may get analysis paralysis. They may want to make no decision rather than the wrong decision. That causes delays. And they may take those high standards and apply them to other people more than themselves. Things need to be aware of when you're talking about the sales side of things. Review your answers to the 4 questions we posed before considering the table. Discuss these conclusions with your manager, a mentor, a coach, a friend, or right now with your team. Confirm the following and act upon it. Which behavior best describes you when you're trying to convince someone to take action or agree with you? That was the first question. The second question, which selling behavior is most comfortable for you when the roles are reversed and someone's selling you? The third, what's your biggest weakness when you consider your most intense selling behavioral style? And what habit are you going to develop to overcome it? And lastly, what's your greatest strength when you consider your most intense behavioral style? And what steps can you take to make it even stronger? You want to play to your strengths. Now here's a summary of that table. It only shows the 2 most common strengths and weaknesses for each selling behavioral style. I'd like you to memorize what's on the screen now. So you can see with the D dominant, I should be able to remember the strengths, very results-oriented, high sense of urgency, and the weaknesses, they may make statements rather than questions. You've seen that before, and that leads you to remember they may try to overpower someone else. The I influencer, hey, they get along with people, they're enthusiastic, they're fun. Okay, but the weakness is maybe they're going to overpromise and talk too much. That makes sense. The steadiness. The strengths are, hey, these are steady, dependable, strong on follow-through, but the weakness is they really lack urgency often, depending on the intensity, and can be easily discouraged, low confidence. And then we go to the upper left, the compliant. The strengths, they know data, they are analytical, they are captain detail. But the weakness is they may overuse the data, and they may be a little bit too reserved or abrupt with people. Even if you hate the thought of selling, confirm your most intense selling behavior and increase your awareness of how others try to convince you. Also, invest time to develop 2 habits. The first is a habit that overcomes a weakness you have when trying to persuade people. And the second is a habit that further develops your strongest behavior when you're trying to convince others to do something. In the prior lesson, you learned similar problem and present behaviors. Now, add in your new understanding of selling behaviors. Remember, continue to expand your strengths. Develop your behavioral superpowers by applying what you're learning. This concludes our 9th lesson on solving, not selling. We discussed the 4 most common selling behaviors and how everyone has 1 to 2 selling behaviors that are most intense, and how to apply this information to develop positive habits to more effectively convince others to agree with you and or take action. Please pass the exam below to complete this lesson and then proceed to lesson 10. Was this lesson uncomfortable for you because we discussed how you persuade others? If so, then maybe you'll like the next one better. It discusses the reverse. How do we buy stuff or agree with people? Thank you.